Live from Rialto, California, Mark Flores presents the Pay-Per-View Wrestling Podcast. Today's topic, No Mercy 2016, the good, the bad, and the ugly of SmackDown's second pay-per-view. Now here's your host, Mark Flores. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to the Pay-Per-View Wrestling Podcast, where I describe No Mercy 2016. I'll give you post-show analysis. I'll also break down the good, the bad, and the ugly of SmackDown's second pay-per-view. Now, a lot of things happened backstage, happened beforehand when it came to No Mercy 2016. There was a lot of things that came beforehand that really had to do with the outcome of some of the matches as far as the card goes. Becky Lynch was injured at a previous live event, and thus she wasn't able to defend her title. Another thing that happened as well, as a matter of fact, I think that was the only thing. The only downside of this whole thing was just the main event for the women's. Well, the women's championship match was conflicted, and so they had to call an audible and actually they had to get Alexa Bliss versus Naomi into the mix. And the other thing that happened during the show was a tweet came out probably about an hour to an hour and a half beforehand announcing that AJ Styles, Dean Ambrose, and John Cena match will be the first match of No Mercy 2016. Now you say to yourself, why would WWE do this? What is their motive for this? Because, like I've mentioned to many people beforehand, everyone has a motive to do something. The presidential debate was on the same night as this pay-per-view was. So, in the interest of people tuning in to the actual match, they decided to put AJ Styles, Dean Ambrose, and John Cena. They decided to put the main event as the first match in this pay-per-view. It's the first time in history, WWE history, that they've done that. And to me, I think that it had to be done for the measures that were laid beforehand. You have to understand that WWE wants people to tune in. So they just had to do the old, drastic times call for drastic measures type of line, and they decided to put the main event ahead as the first match. It was still as entertaining as if it were the last match on the card. You can't take anything away from what they did. It's just from a business perspective, from an entertainment perspective. Their business is entertainment, and that's what they had to do. Let me before I get into the actual match card and start breaking down all these matches here, I'm going to give you guys a quick commercial spot, and I'll be right back. Hello, this is Mark Flores from the Mark F Podcast channel, here to let you know that this podcast episode is brought to you by Game Swappers. Come on down to Game Swappers, located at 4520 Holt Boulevard in Montclair, California, to buy, sell, and trade your current and retro video games from Nintendo Entertainment System to the PS4. Keep in mind that if you share any one of my podcast episodes through any form of social media, you'll get 10% off your entire purchase, or you'll get 10% more towards your retro game trade-ins. Follow Game Swappers on Instagram at GAMESWAPPERS. That's GAMESWAPPERS. Game Swappers. Buy, sell, and trade. Okay, perfect. So now, let's get into the main event as the first topic of the conversation for this podcast episode. AJ Styles, Dean Ambrose, John Cena. The first thing that I noticed about this match as soon as it got underway was that, no one was cheering Dean Ambrose. And it's understandable considering that most chatter banter goes between two people, and it goes to the two most respected of the three, and that's AJ Styles and John Cena. Not saying that Dean Ambrose isn't one to walk amongst the same circles as the other two, but we're talking AJ Styles and John Cena. The crowd was very invested, and you combine that with the star power and the energy. The energy of the crowd actually coming into this match, since it was the first match of the whole card, indeed. So we had a bunch of spots that I want to bring to notice. You had the phenomenal forearm performed to the outside of the arena. You had a double German suplex spot from John Cena himself. And to me, this whole match was pretty much the John Cena bodybuilding exhibition. There's only a few athletes, and I say athletes in general because this guy is a human specimen, John Cena is. Only a few athletes are able to do what John Cena does in the ring. You're talking when someone gives you a cross body, you lay flat, you flip over, and then you deadlift him from the ground up. There's no assistance on what John Cena does as far as deadlifting his opponents and then trying to perform an attitude adjustment after. There was also this other move that he did, was kind of like a sunset flip form power bomb, and that went really well. And the reason I mention that is that this move actually takes a lot of coordination from both people. Think of the Canadian Destroyer. You have to get your opponent to flip, use the momentum of that flip while you're forcing yourself forward to actually perform a powerbomb on him. It's actually the opponent that you're performing the move upon that is using the most of his power to perform it. So that's just one spot I also wanted to mention as well. Dean Ambrose held his own with John Cena and Styles, but like I mentioned before, due to Dean Ambrose's limited moveset, he kind of was underneath the two in terms of attention, and it's not a fault through his own, it's just the fact that he likes using certain moves more than others. There was also one thing I wanted to mention. I don't want to be that much of a smark about it, but when AJ Styles performed a Frankensteiner, Dean Ambrose hits flat on the canvas, and then AJ Styles, with the assistance of Dean Ambrose as well, rotates over, and then AJ Styles is pinned by Dean Ambrose after the Frankensteiner. AJ Styles performed the move upon Dean Ambrose, so I would imagine that Dean Ambrose would want to sell that Frankensteiner, but for him to immediately flip that into a counter, it's just going into the... it's just going into detail with me in particular. I'm just going into detail into saying that, well, hopefully they know not to do that again. If you turn a Frankensteiner into a reversal pin, you have to sell the effects of the Frankensteiner. Otherwise, that move just gets completely washed up and it's like, well, that was a good move, but there was no selling for it. There was no, there's no after effect to it. The one thing I wanted to point out with this match too is that Cena makes it convincing every single time in the ring. From the moves, from the after effects, from the selling. He is one of the best with ring psychology. And I used to be really hard on John Cena. I used to be really hard on Roman Reigns and a few other people. But these guys have improved. Actually have always been great. And well, John Cena has anyway. But Roman Reigns is improving. And Dean Ambrose, to me, in this match, held his own to a certain extent, like I mentioned, but with the whole added of not selling after a Frankensteiner, that's just something to know, to make apparent. But back to what John Cena has here, there's tons of experience. And the reason that he has great ring psychology is that it came from experience. This is his 68th pay-per-view main event. Just try to absorb all that. That's 68 pay-per-views that he's main evented. That's a lot. That's half. If he's done a 10-year career, that's at least half of the pay-per-views that he's been in. You figure 12 pay-per-views a month. Plus, you add the whole draft. You have 12 pay-per-views a month over a course of a decade. That's 120. He's had 68 appearances at a main event pay-per-view. He's done more than half. More than half of a decade's worth of pay-per-views that he's been in, he has been the main event of. That's a lot to take in, ladies and gentlemen. I just wanted to bring that statistic into detail because, the first couple years you're not really going to be main event material till you rise up to the ranks. John Cena definitely did over the last 10 years. So it's just amazing to see, and it's just something to bring out into the open there. But back to the match. You had a beautiful transition that AJ Styles performed on John Cena, where John Cena was performing the attitude adjustment upon AJ Styles. AJ Styles was able to snake under and was able to perform the calf crusher submission in one seamless motion. That was definitely something I wanted to make apparent. And then you also had a double submission. Mike Chioda, you had a double submission being performed on AJ Styles. You had the FU being performed on AJ Styles, and then you had the calf crusher being performed on the other side by Dean Ambrose, and then AJ Styles taps. But since it's a double submission, that completely makes it a wash because there needs to be one victor for this title. So Chioda calls it a no contest for that portion, resumes the match. And then Dean Ambrose performs his very, very dangerous suicide dive, because it is very dangerous. It doesn't look as great as I've seen as the other suicide dives I've seen. And then Dean Ambrose gets the Avalanche AA performed on him, and then AJ comes back into the ring with a steel chair. He gives two steel chair shots to John Cena to get the pin. AJ Styles retains. At least one of my predictions of the night went the way that I intended it to be. This match was a very good match to open up No Mercy 2016. It was a good audible to call, considering the presidential debate. But considering that Becky Lynch was not going to be in the match, a lot of people already had sour grapes going into this. So it was a good curveball to throw to the people for the WWE Universe at that arena by having the main event first. Also considering the outside conditions for viewership. The next match that was up, it was Nikki Bella versus Carmella. Now, I want to tell you guys these apparent facts for now. Nikki Bella and Carmella don't really have much of a moveset. But for the lack of moveset between the two, they did what they know to the best of their abilities. This match was the first of many good matches between the two, and I think Nikki's experience that she can give to Carmella can definitely be beneficial for Carmella. She's been in the ring, it's going on almost near a decade, and she has a lot of experience. So I hope, while they're, rehearsing their matches or anything, that whatever experience that Nikki Bella can bestow upon Carmella, that she gives them all that she can, because Carmella, she's poised in a certain position where she can actually elevate her rank up within SmackDown's roster and elevate to the top. That's going to take a couple of years, but she's already set for that instantly by feuding with Nikki Bella. Carmella had a great submission sequence. I think her Code of Silence submission is only rivaled to that of Natalia's Sharpshooter. I think it's a very unique move. And the way her body type is, there's a lot more emphasis being put onto that submission as well. So not only does it look unique, but you can also see that it is unique to that of Carmella, because not everyone can pull that move off. Nia Jax can't pull that move off. I would say Naomi can pull it off, but I mean, you get my example. Not a lot of people would capitalize with their body type with that submission. And due to Carmella's thin body type, she definitely can put a lot more emphasis onto that move. And she can also put more emphasis onto the move without compromising pain to the other opponent that she's performing it on. Just makes it a lot more safer as well. So what ended up happening is that Nikki Bella ended up winning. So she was able to get the revenge onto Carmella, which is good. I just think that there needs to be a lot there. I think this is going to rise Nikki Bella up to the ranks of the women's division, but what I need is a solidified win from Becky Lynch over Nikki Bella. That way, it kind of shows people that Becky Lynch is actually the real deal. So hopefully, stuff like this can come along the way after the whole Naomi and Alexa Bliss thing comes to a cease. And I'll explain that later as the show goes on. The next match that we have is the heel Usos, the non-painted face Usos. You can actually tell between the two who's Jimmy or Jay. And you have Heath Slater and Rhino. Now, this match didn't go as I anticipated. I anticipated Rhino to turn heel, but it didn't happen. But I still stand by what I said is that, and that's by the feud that Heath and Rhino can have on a one-on-one singles match is going to be a lot more beneficial to them rather than a tag team championship run. I think soon enough that championship has to go to the Usos for the American Alpha to end up winning it over the Usos. They're the most legitimate team of this tag team division to put over American Alpha. But one thing to mention about this match, the highlights of this match, is I love the heel work by Jimmy and Jay. They did it to a great extent. They made the crowd just hate them, chanting ECW in front of Rhino while Rhino was down, letting everyone know. I think it was Jay that was letting everyone know that he also has kids in mocking Heath Slater. But I want to get this out of the way, is that both Heath and Rhino showed me some more legitimacy today. They showed me that they deserve the straps because they can put on a great show between any one person that you put them against. The way that this match went is the same way this typical Heath Slater and Rhino thing went along. You had Heath Slater taking a majority of the bumps, and then you had Rhino coming in with a hot tag, and then you have shenanigans going into the ring to then have either Jimmy or Jay get a spear and get the pin. So they actually retained the titles tonight, Heath and Rhino. Not tonight, I mean on at No Mercy. So this actually brings some momentum to them. So now we scrap the Heath and Rhino singles feud for a little bit, but that's still going to be gold between the two, and that goes without saying. But maybe there's also, maybe we haven't ridden, maybe they haven't, maybe the momentum of this tag team isn't done yet. And that's good, because Heath Slater deserves his little time in the limelight, even if it's just with the tag team titles. Not to take any legitimacy away from the tag team titles, but when you share the tag team titles, there's two people involved. There's less emphasis on you, but the team instead. But anyway, congratulations to Heath and Rhino for retaining. The Usos are, like I want to mention, they're in a position where they can bounce back. They can always feud with whoever because they are a very well-known and well-recognized tag team, and they can keep going, whether it's losing to up-and-comers or losing to title holders, just because they can always get back into the tag team picture. So the next match that we have on the card here is Jack Swagger versus Baron Corbin. So there was a lot of build-up with Jack Swagger. There's tons of build-up. And we're wondering, wow, who's he going to fight? And we go through the Rolodex of names within SmackDown Live, and we find ourselves with Baron Corbin. So this could have went one of two ways. You would either have it go where Baron Corbin beats Jack Swagger, elevates his name from the lower card to the mid card. Jack Swagger is Jack Swagger, where he ends up losing everybody. And this went that exact way. And you couldn't see it any other way, really. So they ride out this whole feud between the two to all culminate here at No Mercy 2016. And Baron Corbin gets elevated, so we have to see what goes on from here. But to go to the match, I like the chemistry between the two. It was two big guys going at it. It was a really gruesome match. There's a lot of outside spots with Jack Swagger selling his arm throughout the whole match. And I think a lot of people don't put that much attention to detail as some other, some wrestlers do, some wrestlers don't. But when you actually sell the whole arm, the whole match, it brings legitimacy to the injury. It helps put the other guy over because, like, wow, he's really, the heel is actually putting in work. So, in terms of booking, it goes good for Baron Corbin. Jack Swagger doesn't necessarily care, nor should he, because it's just, he's making entertainment at its finest. So, you can't really knock the guy for that. Both men, for the short time that they were in the ring, they actually put a great show on for the fans. I thought this was going to go more along the lines of a squash match, so they indeed proved me wrong. And I like that. But the thing is, with Baron Corbin, I'm already sold on the fact that his moveset, the moveset that Baron Corbin has, is attributed to him because he is a heel. So the finish that he has where he eye rakes and then goes for the end of days, that's understandable. And now I'm coming to an understanding. I never really enjoyed Baron Corbin for a long time when he was in NXT, simply because he was in about 4 months worth of squash matches. And it was just like, wow, we already know what's going to happen. But what they want to build him up as is just this human wrecking machine. And I'm slowly starting to buy into that. And with him taking down Jack Swagger, that's exactly what they wanted you to see. They wanted the audience to see the good old American boy getting toppled by some other guy coming out of left field in terms of him just showing up during the draft. And now he's doing his thing. So this is this is a W and the long lines of W's that Baron Corbin's going to have along the way. He already took care of Apollo Crews. Now he's taking care of Jack Swagger, so we got to see what happens from that point on. To get to the result of the match, like I mentioned, a face rake to the end of days. Baron Corbin gets to the pin and loses and beats Jack Swagger. So the next match that we have to discuss here is The Miz versus Dolph Ziggler. This is, as I imagined it during the whole predictions podcast, it had the everything, the stars were aligning for this match to be the match of the night. The implications of what was at stake really made this a very important match to both wrestlers, and they knew it. They knew that this match was going to be the most watched match of the night, just because of the implications behind it. Both of them knew it, and they knew that they needed to tear the house down. Some things to note about the match, just some details I wrote down, is that the heat that Miz gets to me is well deserved, especially when he mocks Daniel Bryan, and I love it. You have to imagine that mocking Daniel Bryan is like one of the cardinal sins of WWE now, because the man's retired due to health situations, and he can't, fight back necessarily. They don't really want to put him in a feud. Maybe this is just a work all the way up to a WrestleMania, who knows? Which is kind of what I'm thinking, because he still throws unnecessary heat at Daniel, so we'll see what happens in terms of that and The Miz. But now with The Miz and Dolph Ziggler that we have tonight, or for No Mercy 2016, The Miz puts up his Intercontinental title. Dolph Ziggler puts up his whole career. I myself thought that Dolph Ziggler was just on his way out, and boy was I proved wrong. So going through this match, you have both of these guys going at it back and forth for 20 plus minutes. They both showed intensities with their movesets. Both of these guys do have dense movesets. And Dolph selling the figure four during the later part of the match, you felt his pain. And then when you see Miz start taking off the turnbuckle pad, you then get built up to, wow, this is going to be shenanigans. The way the Miz is going to win, he's going to win by shenanigans. So the crowd hits a fever pitch after Dolph Ziggler gets hit with the turnbuckle corner, ends up going into some shenanigans. Then Miz goes in for the pin for 1, 2, 3. No, Dolph Ziggler puts his leg up on that rope. Everyone gets, the whole crowd's going nuts. The crowd's invested into this match, and that's the beauty of it. So then you had the skull crushing finale reversal to a roll up was very well executed, but then you get a 2 count for Dolph Ziggler. So Dolph's trying to figure out what to do this whole time. And then Maurice sprays Dolph. And then the Miz gets a 2 count with that. And then until Dolph puts his foot on the rope. So this is getting crazy. This is getting very crazy now. Then the Miz tries to drag Dolph to the center of the ring. Takes off Dolph's boot. And then without the boot, Dolph Ziggler gives him a super kick. And then the one thing I want you guys to note is look at the moment where Dolph Ziggler hits the Miz with the super kick, and look at Dolph selling the kick, like he just kicked the Miz with all he had. So then what ends up happening is Dolph Ziggler ends up bringing out, Maurice ends up calling out the Spirit Squad and sets up a skull-crushing finale, but then Dolph Ziggler kicks out of the skull-crushing finale. And then at this point, the arena's on their feet. So the ref sees the whole shenanigans by the Spirit Squad and a combination of the Spirit Squad and Maurice. So the ref ends up ejecting all 3 out. With the distraction provided with that ejection, the Miz turns around, gets a super kick to the face, and Dolph Ziggler gets the pin. Dolph Ziggler ends up keeping his career intact, but ends up hoisting the Intercontinental title in return. This definitely foiled my prediction, and I'm glad it did. This might be a resurgence for Dolph Ziggler's career. This still retains that the prestige of the Intercontinental title just because of the importance that Miz put on it. And Dolph Ziggler, with the pop he got, with the implications behind him retaining the Intercontinental title, let's just hope to see a good feud go on with this, because there is going to be a rematch clause provided for the Miz too, with the title as well. But one thing I wanted to note is that this should have been the main event. With everything on the line and with the audible being called by WWE to have the other main event be the first match, you then look at booking and you're like, well, we have a championship versus career match. Oh no, we'll just put it right here, and we'll leave the Bray Wyatt and Randy Orton as the main event, as the last match of the night. To me, that just doesn't make sense. But in terms of emergency situations, in terms of the backstage stuff, I don't know why they would do it like that, but it's all in the past now. If I were in charge of booking, it would have been the main event. And what a main event it would have been. To leave and take home what happened at No Mercy by Dolph Ziggler ending what The Miz has done for 180 plus days, keeping his career, winning the Intercontinental title, that would have been a great take home. That would have kept the internet buzzing for a long time. But then it didn't happen. Dolph Ziggler gets the title. Miz loses the title, so there's really not a lot of bad blood being spilt that much to a certain degree. So that's good for Dolph Ziggler. I'm very proud of the match because that was a great match, and it definitely stole the show. It was the best match of the night. So the next match we have up here, we have Alexa Bliss versus Naomi. And one thing to note during this whole match, despite the botches, and I'll excuse the botches because this was a half-assembled match at the last minute, so you can't really take anything away from the two. I know they're professionals, but you still have to work between two people. As the old saying goes, it takes two to tango. And in the same respect to wrestling, you do need some prior rehearsal time to actually perform a great match between your other opponent. But one thing I want to note is for this match between Alexa Bliss and Naomi, the audible call to the former Alexa Bliss versus Becky Lynch match, is that Alexa Bliss makes up for her height with great heel psychology and keeps her opponent in the center of the ring in submissions and holds, yelling at her opponents, yelling at the crowd. So she's great. She does a lot more than what some women heels do at her position. So she's doing a great job. And I dare speak very highly of her because she's making up for what she doesn't have physically by using everything else she has at her disposal. Long story short, there wasn't really, there was a little bit of botches here and there within the match, but long story short, Naomi ends up surprisingly getting the armbar submission turned into a reversal to a pin. Naomi walks away the victor. And then immediately, with that W by Naomi against Alexa Bliss, it literally puts her in a triangle between Alexa Bliss, Becky Lynch, and herself for the WWE Women's Championship. So, we have to see what culminates from here. After Becky Lynch is healed up from her injuries, we have to see what goes along the lines of the two there. One thing to note, too, as well, is that Alexa Bliss's reaction to herself losing was very comical. She was all panting on the ground, panting on the mat, rather, throwing a tantrum, and I thought it was very amusing. That's one thing to note. Alexa Bliss still keeps the title picture in her sights. Naomi gets title picture in her sights. So, despite the fact that Alexa Bliss loses, she still has the right to be in the title picture because she never essentially lost to Becky Lynch. So she still has that to have at the end of the day. She still has that in her arsenal to use. Next match we have is the half-assembled main event due to card changes, like I mentioned. Bray Wyatt versus Randy Orton. And like I imagined, between the two anyway, the decision didn't go my way. I had Randy Orton winning this, but surprise, surprise, right in your eyes, Bray Wyatt wins. One thing to mention, for both guys to have a half-structured feud that they've decided to put together now, it seems that both have made it work on this fateful night in terms of having a great match. You know, with the past history of what Bray Wyatt can do and the past history of what Randy Orton can do, for the first time in WWE history, they do meet. And both guys put in work and love the business. And for these guys to have put in 100% with a feud with zero momentum increase on either way shows that they are definitely professional and that they love the sport. I just wanted to get that out of the way first and foremost. Bray Wyatt and Randy Orton facing for the first time, it was a sight for sore eyes because it's just great to see what Bray Wyatt can do under someone under the likes of Randy Orton. It's good to see him back facing top tier talent and being put over by top tier talent. I'm glad Randy Orton was cool along the way to let Bray Wyatt win. And I think both of them have great chemistry inside the ring and outside for all the stuff that was going on the outside where Bray Wyatt and Randy Orton were throwing each other around on the outside. And in some respect, the best thing about these two guys is that they are able to be put in any feud and they're able to make it work. One spot to note that I thought was the spot of the night was the semi DDT that Bray Wyatt put Randy Orton in. It was very enjoyable to see. And another spot exchange is both of them were exchanging reversals, counters, and strikes for 30 plus seconds during the latter part of the match. And almost immediately after, the lights go down, and then the lights go back up, and then all you see is a cloaked person in the ring. He takes off the top of the hood, and it's Luke Harper. Luke Harper shows up, doesn't touch Randy Orton, so it's completely still legal. It's just you need the ref to go ahead and eject him out of the picture. But then he ends up leaving, and then Randy Orton turns around and then gets the Sister Abigail finish from Bray Wyatt. Bray Wyatt ends up taking the W against Randy Orton. So this match has not necessarily, it brings a little momentum to Bray Wyatt for the main title picture, but I don't think that the three-way match between Cena and Ambrose is necessarily done. I think one of those two is still going to be exchanging themselves in a feud. I think more importantly, John Cena might be. And I'll go into more speculation with that later. But Bray Wyatt can now be in the talks to being a number one contender for the title, since Randy Orton is a prestigious name. That's something you can't take away from that guy. Not necessarily a shutout of complete momentum for Randy Orton because of the shenanigans implied by Luke Harper. So it's one of those win-win situations. Randy Orton can still be in the title picture whenever he wants. Bray Wyatt gets his name elevated and then can start a feud between Randy Orton and Luke Harper. Hopefully something can go from there. There's nothing but a bunch of seeds being planted for whatever feud can be used at this point between the two or the people outside of the two. And that's what good wrestling's all about. It's about keeping it evolving, keeping it changing. As long as you're planting seeds for all that, that's perfect. So, overall, this pay-per-view was semi-sweet. There's a lot of great matches, and you can't really say that this was a bad pay-per-view simply because of everything that went on outside the two things. Mainly was Becky Lynch being injured, no fault of her own, it just happens, so card subject to change. And then you had the main event being pushed first, which I didn't think necessarily was a bad thing. To some it may be, but it still was a hell of a match. It would have been one thing if it was pushed forward and the match ended up blowing, but it didn't. So overall, this pay-per-view was a B- to a B. You can't really take anything from it. It was done to the full extent of what it could have been done as. Anyway, I want to thank you guys for listening to the Pay-Per-View Wrestling Podcast. I am going to end it with the spot for Game Swappers, and then after that, I'll see you guys later. You guys have a good day. Let me end it off with the Game Swappers spot. Hello, this is Mark Flores from the Mark F Podcast channel, here to let you know that this podcast episode is brought to you by Game Swappers. Come on down to Game Swappers, located at 4520 Holt Boulevard in Montclair, California, to buy, sell, and trade your current and retro video games from Nintendo Entertainment System to the PS4. Keep in mind that if you share any one of my podcast episodes through any form of social media, you'll get 10% off your entire purchase, or you'll get 10% more towards your retro game trade-ins. Follow Game Swappers on Instagram at GAMESWAPPERS. That's GAMESWAPPERS. Game Swappers. Buy, sell, and trade. I want to thank you guys for tuning in to the Pay-Per-View Wrestling Podcast for the post-show analysis of No Mercy 2016. You guys have a good day. Take care of yourselves.